So, guys, here we have another amazing session for you all planned. So, the session will be taken by Neer Kaufman. The name of the session is Auth-Driven Navigation Using Context. Our speaker is a web developer, community enthusiast. He loves to organize meetups. He's an international public speaker, a trainer, an author, a Google developer expert, and whatnot. So the sessions basically will focus on how to implement auth-driven navigation using context and hooks and React Router. So it's a live coding interactive session in which things will be we'll be building it from scratch. So get ready for the session. I hope you'll love that session. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Can you share my screen, please? All right. So, hey everyone. There's not going to be too much slides. Technically, I've got only 2.5 slides, and we're going to jump right into code. That's the reason that you see half of my screen right now. The title for this session going to be Auth-Driven Navigation. Basically, I would like to share with you my technique of implementing routing based on roles. So just a tiny introduction, and the most important thing from this slide is my little website, near.life, where you can keep in touch after this session ends, and you can find a lot of ways to contact me and get access to other materials that I'm sharing across the web. So that's near.life, and I'm going to share it by the end of this session. The whole point of my use case or case study, like the conference name, is that I'm on an ongoing journey to try to see how I can keep things as simple as possible. Software is not easy. Software is not simple. But as we all know, the key, the holy grail of software development is to get into a situation where you find your way to write code that you can actually read and understand even without running it whatsoever. So, yep, code is for humans, guys. Let me show you what's going to be the end results. I'm not going to code everything. I'm not going to focus on the important parts, but I created this nice demo, and I'm going to share this code with you on GitHub, both the server side and the React side, so you can play with it and explore a little bit. I created a tiny demo where I can log in, put my email. So that's going to be Neil Kaufman at gmail.com. I can enter my password, and then obviously I'm going to be routed into a route which, if you can see the URL, say burgers, and I can go to the pizza page. But if I log out, obviously I can't get into the pizza route whatsoever. Same thing for the burgers. So tiny demo. It's not about the size, it's about the technique. So let me jump right into the code. Right here, you can see an app, React app that was generated using Create React app. There's nothing in it, all right? Just the known boilerplate. It looks like like this. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to clean it up, so it's going to be easier for us to see exactly what's going on. I don't even need this div for now. I'm just going to render some hello routing or auth routing, because that's the name of that technique. All right. So hello auth routing, and we're up and running. The first thing that I would like to implement is the actual business logic that can go and reach the server and communicate with API. So most of my projects contains a folder called services. I just borrowed this name from the Angular ecosystem. I know it's not very common in React apps to have a directory named services, but it works for me. So that's good enough. Inside of it, I'm going to create an API JS file. And on this file, I'm going to implement, actually, basically, I'm going to implement a very, very, very simple and straightforward function. This one I'm going to copy paste from the demo, which called API request, which going to handle all the API requests in my app. Now, this demo that I prepared for you implement authentication using JWT tokens, which means that every time that I make an API request, I'm going to get a token back from the server. I'm going to need to save this token on local storage, and then on every request, I'm going to need to send this token away. Because this session is not about Axios, I prepared the code for you, which look like this. I'm using a feature of Axios called Interceptors. Basically, it's enabled me to pipe into the HTTP request response pipe, stream, whatever you want to call it. And over there, I can take the token from the header, save it on local storage, and get it when I need it. So I created this code. I pasted here because, again, Axios, it's not the real topic of this session, but I did want to give you something which is, let's say, more production-like and not just for the sake of the demo, making an API request that doesn't do anything that I would do on a real app. All right. Another best practice, as you can see here, I'm taking the storage key and the API URL from an environment file. So I'm going to create an environment file. And on this environment file, I'm going to create React app and API URL that just going to direct to the basically HTTP, because that's what I'm using, and localhost at port 3000. That's going to be my server URL. And the other one going to be a React app storage key. And here I can just, let's give it a name, where I'm going to save the token. I'm going to call it user tokens. The reason that I'm starting with React app, if you're not familiar with this procedure, you should, because that's the way, in this way, I can pick it up like this. From the process environment, I can pick up React app API URL, create React app, I'm gonna make sure that it's available on the process environment object, but we have to provide this prefix. Cool. So now we've got a service, a simple service called an API service, and we can go ahead and make some API requests, which means that the next step will be to create some methods that enable me to log in and log out. I'm going to create another service. I'm going to call this service Auth. And again, because we are not in React yet, we're just dropping some important pieces of JavaScript, I'm going to paste an example of pre-made functions that I created. The first one is validate token. We're going to make an API request and check if we already logged in. The other one is obviously sign in. We're going to send the email and the password. Sign up, so you can send the name, email, and password, and sign out, which basically gonna make a delete request to API and return null. Again, I created this example because I want you to have an access to code that I would write in production and not just a bunch of lines, which doesn't make any sense. Now let's start with the interesting part, at least for me. I'm going to create a component, and I'm going to call this component Auth component. It's going to have a very important role in a second. It's going to be under shared library. just because that's my practice. I'm gonna call this component Auth. Yes. All right. And inside of it, let the fun begin. I'm gonna make some imports. So I'm gonna import from React, obviously, and use state and use effect. I'm also gonna import the API request method that I prepared for you, the one that I showed you a second ago. So from my services, from API, I'm gonna take API requests so I can make API requests. Next, I'm gonna export a context object straight from React. I'm gonna call it Auth context. I'm gonna use React, create context. I'm gonna keep it empty for now. Next, I'm gonna create, actually, I don't think I need to, but let's leave it alone. All right, I've got an Auth context. The context, I assume most of you are familiar with this feature. Context is a mechanism built in React that enables me to expose pieces of data to the entire tree of components using a high order component which called provider. So this pattern of providing and consuming pieces of this object is something that's built in React for years, become a little bit more popular since hooks was introduced, but it's not recommended as a full-fledged state management technique, because every time you update this state, the context object, you might gonna cause re-render of your entire tree, which is obviously not a thing that you want to do, unless we are talking about authentication. It was important to me to explain it because authentication, I believe, and I use context because the fact that I can access from everywhere and cause a full re-render. Usually, if you are authenticated or not, if there is a current user or not, gonna affect the entire app. So I'm gonna implement the actual component right now, React Stateless component. This component gonna wrap other components, so I'm gonna pass children. I'm gonna distract children from props. I'm gonna use state, the use state hook that I just showed you. And this state gonna hold initial loading and obviously set initial loading. Use state, use state. The ID is fighting with me. And that's gonna start as actually as true. Why not? Just a Boolean so I can track if I'm currently on a state of initial loading. The authentication high order component is gonna make use of it in a second. The next one, which I think is most important, I'm gonna hold a user and set user object on my state. And I'm gonna start with null. Next, I'm gonna implement a method called set current user, which I'm gonna get a new user and gonna set the user, gonna trigger re-render. Right, so I'm gonna set the user with the object that I just got. Now, just in case that I don't have a new user, this method can be called before I got a user. It might be undefined or null. I'm gonna go to local storage and I'm gonna remove the item. You remember the key that I created on my environment, this user token, React App Storage key, the one that I use on API. I'm going to take this key. I can take this entire thing from process environment, go back to my component, and I'm going to remove this entire thing. A better way to do it would be to create a const right here. I can do it in a better way. I think it's going to be good enough for now. I don't need all of this. Come on. The most unimportant thing going on right now. You know what? I'm just going to take the value directly from environment, the user tokens, and I'm going to paste it here. Not the best practice. Don't do it. There is a reason why I saved it. All right. The next method that I'm going to implement, this is going to be maybe the most important method. I'm going to call this method Authenticated. Hopefully I don't have any typos. It's going to be an async function. Async anonymous function. I'm going to use try and catch here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to take the response from API request. I'm going to provide a path. And the path, let me just paste it, because I don't want to make any errors right now. The path is going to be this path. So authenticate, going to try to get a response, and then I can just check if I got a response through 100. All right. I can set the current user. I know that my response data on the data objects contains the user. So I'm setting the state. I'm going to trigger a full re-render, which this is exactly what I want to do. And I'm going to catch an error if it exists. And just for now, I'm just going to console log it because it's not that important. And maybe most, very important, finally, we're going to set the initial loading to false. All right? So I've got a method called authenticate. I've got a method to set the current user. And if there is no current user, to remove the key that holds the token from the local storage. And you might wonder why I ask for use effect. And actually, use effect is going to be very effective right now. When this component loads for the first time, I want to try to authenticate. That's the reason I've got the use effect here. I know it's an async function, but actually I don't really care about what's going to come back from it. All right, and an if just floating in my component, an if statement that checked it. If there is initial loading, I want to return something like let's do, I don't know, an H4 for now, saying I'm loading. And we got to the return. The return, I'm going to use the provider, the Auth context, provider. Provider accepts a value. The value is going to be the context. Actually, the value should be the user, but I want to expose the method of how I set a user as well. So let me use something like this. Let me create a constant. I call this concept context, but it's actually going to be an object. I'm going to expose both the user and the set current user. Now that I've got both, I can expose them through context to my entire app. And here, the only thing that's left to do is calling children, but my children going to be a function. So I'm going to call children as a function. It's going to be some kind of a rendered prop, but I am using children. and I'm going to call my children with context.user. Let me summarize it for a second. All the business logic, right? My component, it's not a very good name. I might change it to Auth and export Auth. All the business logic, all the state management of, well, first initial loading because the app just got started, setting the user, triggering a re-render, calling authenticate using useFact only once when this component is initialized, returning a loading, so basically blocking everything, and using the context but exposing both user and set user, and then using the children as a render prop, passing just the user without the set user. That's the first part of my entire implementation. All right. Now, because I promised you a use of routes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to implement routing for my app. Routing for my app, I'm going to implement it not as a component, but as a function. Let me show you how it looks like. I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call this file routes.js. Right? I'm going to export a function. I'm going to call this function actually routes. All right? Let me make it larger. Const routes. Const routes is going to be a function that accepts current user. And now that's the best part. Remember that I started with a slide saying, I want to keep things simple. I want to try to keep things as simple as possible. Now, when we're dealing with authentication-based routing, it's very easy to implement too much abstractions, if you ask me. High-order component, which is not that straightforward. If I'm a new developer and I need to implement some kind of a new routes that are available just for admins or just for users, I need to dive into wrappers and components and user authentication and libraries and so and so. But basically what we want to do is a simple if-else. So my whole technique based on a simple flat if-else statement. Let me show you how it looks like. I'm going to create just let me create a few dummy pages. So I'm going to create a directory. I'm going to call this directory pages. I'm not going to implement the actual component in there, but just so we have something. For example, login component, so login.js. I'm going to use some React Stateless component. That's going to be login. All right. I'm going to implement what else? Register.js. So React Stateless component register. And let's create some pages that should be protected or not be protected. It depends. I'm going to create a home.js and few pages that shouldn't be available if you're not logged in. For example, a pizza page, React Stateless component pizza page, and the last one gonna be burgers page, React Stateless component burgers. So I've got some pages to work with. I'm gonna go back to my routes function, and now it's gonna be simple as implementing a bunch of if-else. For example, if there is no current user, which routes you like to make available for the app. All right. For example, let me implement this. If the current user, if there is no current user, sorry. All right. I'm going to use switch coming from React router. think I should import it first. That's gonna help me a lot. Import. You know what? I don't think I even installed it. So let me do it real fast. npm. Why am I package JSON? Did I install React DOM? Oh, I totally missed the React router. All right. So let me quickly install React router DOM. Don't worry, it's not going to take too long. Meanwhile, I'm going to use this React router DOM like it was exist. So I'm going to import from, and it's going to be available in a second, from React router DOM. And if there's no current user, I want several apps to be available. For example, I want home login and register. Home and login. You know what? Home and login, that's good enough for now. I want home and login to be available if there is no current user. Make sense? I even want to do a redirect to, and if there's anything that it's, let me use a wildcard here, anything that is not recognized, I can just send it straight home. Sorry of all of these colors, it's because I don't have it. I don't have the package installed. But that's what happens when your demo is too light. So what I'm trying to show you is if current user, that's what I want my app to look like. On the exact same manner, I can go ahead and implement the rest of the routes that I want to be available if the user is logged in. All right. So if the user is logged in, that's my else statement right here. Go ahead, show the header, and show the burgers and pizza. And why am I so excited about this technique? Because I believe that right now, as a developer, if you need to route some pages, all right, if you want to decide which pages or which components are available, it's easy as putting them inside the right if statement. If you want to make it a little bit more complicated, all you need to do is basically just add another if. For example, if there's no current user, just home login, all right, and redirect to home. If there is current user and current user role equals, I don't know, customer. Let's say that you've got this kind of a user. Well, go ahead and just drop whatever routes need to be available to a customer, right? And so and so. If the current user role, there is current user, and the current user role is admin. So in this case, go ahead and show just the components that need to be available to an admin. And you can create your own rules, obviously, but if you ask me, it's pretty much straightforward. This whole sorting of routes inside of if flat if blocks, I can see right away without any abstractions that if a specific role is the role of my current user, so I can introduce routes to my app. Everything is 100% declarative, and there are no too much abstraction on top of it. Now, the route is a function. So to actually make it work, I need to make use of this function somewhere. And this is where the Auth that I built before kicks in. Let me show you. Now I can wrap my entire app with Auth. Now remember or not, but my Auth component accepts children and accept children to be a function, which is not a problem because route is a function, which I don't think that I export. All right, so now I can just pass routes, which is a function, and my auth gonna use context, should be able to import it. My auth gonna take this function, gonna re-render whenever I'm gonna call set current user, and I'm gonna call this function passing just the users, which means that my function, which is called routes, is straightforward. I'm getting a current user and I'm deciding which routes I want to return. So you might ask yourself, all right, everything is cool, we get the idea, but why did you use context? So let me show you the final results of this entire thing. The results that I'm going to share with you on GitHub. All right. Let me zoom in a little bit. Zoom in. I don't know how to zoom in with VS Sorry. All right. So you might ask yourself, everything looks cool. I just don't get the context part. Why did you use context here? Why did you create it out of context? Why do you provide through context both the user and set current user? And well, you got the trick with children as a render prop and passing just the user to keep the routes straightforward, all right? So I don't need to think too much, just putting stuff inside of an if-else block. So what's the thing about the context? The thing is that now from every point in my app, for example, my login component, I can use the hook use context, get the set current user. You know, technically, I don't even need to pass the user through context. I can just expose the set current user, and that's it. Each component, like the login or register, can get the set current user, call the set current user. In this case, when I'm logged in, the set current user coming from context gonna change the context, which gonna trigger my auth component, right? Because everything is wrapped with auth context. It's gonna call the route again, the function, and then this logic gonna run. And I'm gonna get different available routes. On the other hand, if there are some components that or some shared UI that which need to be shown or hidden if a user is logged in or not, easily I can use context to get the user out of it and write some conditional rendering just using the user. Right? So for example, this page container, let's say that this heading is available only if the user role is admin or whatever. So the user is connected, logged in, but only if it's admin. I want to go ahead and show this entire section. All right, let me just do several undos. This project that I created right here is available for you, already available for you in GitHub. If there is one thing that I would like you to take from my technique, from this use case, is that I think the heart of this whole technique, or I don't want to call it a pattern, it's not a real pattern, it's my own journey to find a way to easily and in a declarative, very declarative way, make it easy to add route based on specific rules. I had my own journey of trying to implement the exact same thing, but using other techniques. For example, take a component and wrap it with some high order function like with auth. So now this component is wrapped with auth, and inside of the with auth function, I can implement the entire business logic. But then I got into a situation and said, well, that's not good enough for me because I don't want the component, I don't want to expose the component wrapped with auth because I'm tied to the authentication logic and I might want to use this Pita component without authentication. But even more important is that I like code to be friendly to other developers. So I believe that introducing a function like this route function, which usually have some few more blocks, that straightforward you can read in plain English in one place, in one huge block, if a current user is something is X or Y, and then just return the components that indicate your route, I found it a very friendly piece of code. I tested apps that use this technique by introducing new developers uh, um, into my system and ask them, all right, try to read the code and understand how my routing mechanism works, how Auth based routing works in my app. And well, almost 100% of the feedback was good, so I'm on the right direction. Obviously, nothing perfect, and I've got a lot of other. And probably, if I'll talk with you in 6 months from now, I might find another way. This works for me. So no high order functions, no complicated hidden abstractions. By the end, I mean the bottom line, it's going to be a function that I call routes that implement if blocks using context as a mechanism that works on a positive way and re-render the entire app using children as render props. So I can just pass the user into this simple function. And yeah, and basically that's it. This app is up and running. Like I said before, I've got both the server and the client, which a little bit more of code. Most of it borrowed from a production system, so you can investigate and play with it. If you got some opinions for good or bad, actually there is no good or bad. It's not the right terms to use. If you got some opinions for something like, well, I like the technique, but I think you can do better because of, always provide a reason. I'll be more than happy to hear and learn from you as well. So I hope you enjoyed my case study of how I implemented authentication-based rules using context, the use context hook, and a lot of other great things in React, like high order functions and render props, render children prop, that eventually end up in a simple if-else blocks that decide which routes you wanna show up. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. And if you like to get the code, go ahead and visit near.life, my very simple and humble website where you can find this nice icon for GitHub, and you can look ahead and find everything you've just seen and much more than this. So, questions, if you've got any.
Uh, cool. Thank you for the amazing session, Neil. It was really an amazing session. We got to learn a lot of things from you.
Thank
So
you.
I'm really thankful for this. So I'm just waiting for the questions from the audience to come, so that we can, clear the doubts of the audience.
Mhm.
Okay. So I have a question for you. You
Mhm.
told about context API, right? That
Mhm.
you can use context API, but the problem about it is that it re-renders everything. Like if you
Yes.
change something, it changes everything. So like for these small websites, the websites which has less pages, which are not so dynamic, I think it works, right? But for the big websites, the websites which are having a lot of data, a lot of pages, a lot of you know
Yeah.
big
So
websites basically. Hmm.
yeah, so the thing is that my specific techniques, as you just seen, are using context to decide which routes are available, which means that I'm not really re-render a huge tree of components. But even more important, even if you've got a huge tree of components, you've got a very, very large application. It's very important to learn something about React. Re-rendering doesn't necessarily mean bad performance because React gonna re-render a lot, and each time a component is re-rendered, it returns an object. If the object is equal to the previous object, the DOM is not gonna be updated. So you can use context, again, in some scenarios like authentication and theming and so, even if you've got a very large tree of components, just remember that re-rendering, it's not necessarily an issue. How many times the DOM is actually updated and repainting, that's the real issue. So if you've got 1,000 components re-rendered, but there are not a lot of changes, that's not a problem. If you depend on context of every piece of your components and every re-render, the entire DOM need to be updated because there's a lot of changes, then I would suggest maybe to try another technique. So hope that's answer your question.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Nair. It answers my question. So rest all questions we are going to take it on the Q&A session.
All right. Good.
Really, I really thank you for this session. It was really amazing and interactive session. We learned a
Thank
lot of
you.
things from you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.